all of a sudden the guy on the end of the bench looks a little bit different to you when you've been that guy on the end of the bench. From a leadership perspective, I think it's a great lesson because, being a leader, obviously you've got to be able to lead yourself. You've got to know yourself, but you need to know other people as well. And if you can look down the bench and have that perspective of, man, I've not sat on that bench, but I've sat on a bench like that. I've been the player who wasn't the stud in a sport. I think it can give a great perspective.
Welcome to the How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast, where we explore leadership principles through the lens of the beautiful game.
Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of this conversation. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and with me is my brother, my co-host, Paul Jobson. Paul, how you doing, man?
Doing great, Phil. Just working through a little bit of a summer cold, so I'll try to mute my microphone if I've got to clear my throat at any point so I don't throw anybody off as they're driving. But things are good, man. Just winding down the summer, getting ready for for school to kick back off again. It's crazy how fast I think this summer really has flown. Marcy and I were talking the other day about it's been an awesome summer. We're getting a lot done and, just family wise and Warrior Way wise and everything. But man, school is just, right around the corner again, and ramping up for that for all four of the boys is a feat within itself. So winding down summer sports, ramping up school and fall sports is kind of where we are. And I know in your household, you got a lot going on, man. You're planning weddings. You're probably getting ready to send kids back to school. And so you've probably got a lot going on as well, man.
We do. Before we get into that, which we do with a little tease, is this year, we don't have 4 weddings and a funeral. We have 6 weddings and a funeral. This summer, we have 4 weddings and a funeral. So there's a lot of good stuff going on. Some, obviously there's, it's life, right? There's the ups and downs. But this episode is the season 11 post-match show, and it was a great season. We're going to get into that here in a little bit. Phenomenal season. We even had a little extra time episode on the NCAA settlement, which that's not over, folks. We're going to have some more conversations about that as it plays out. Yeah. Now, if you're following it at all, there's roster size limits. There are all kinds of other things going on with that. And that schools are scrambling a bit to figure out like what is going on. A lot of coaches have put recruiting on hold. Some are bragging that they are not putting recruiting on hold. I don't know if it's bragging is the right word, but probably because they need some more players and they're not part of the Power 4, whatever. They're not. They know where they're at, but that's something that we will help navigate at some level. That's not obviously the main thrust of the show, but we definitely want to help navigate that if we can. So we'll be hitting some of that as it clears up a bit in the future. But we'll talk a little bit about that later on today in this episode, as well as we talk about the NCAA settlement episode that we did do this half. Also, in this season, the second half of this season, we had episode 150, which we didn't make a real big deal about during the episode, but it was our last episode with Jessica Hain, and that was episode 150, which is, it's crazy. We're moving along and got a lot of really good stuff over the last 150 episodes. But what does that make you what does that evoke in you as I say episode 150?
It's just hard to think back how many we've actually done. I know there's a number there, but the reality is like there's been so much great stuff over the couple of years here. You think at some point it's what more can you get? But man, every conversation leads to something new, and it's been really an incredible experience. And you're right, we really didn't make a big deal of the 150, but we probably should make a bigger deal about it, because it's and I would give credit to you. I mean, the amount of work behind the scenes to get these things done, you're doing all of that. So easy for me, but it's a lot of work, and you're doing a great job, and I appreciate your commitment to it. And I'm sure our listeners do too, but there's a lot of work behind it. So to get to that point is a pretty big moment. So yeah, just really kind of cool to think about.
Yeah, it is. And, as you've talked about, or as you mentioned earlier, like it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but it's worth it, I think, and I hopefully listeners, you think the same thing. And I do hope you're sharing it with others. I hope that if it's helping you, you're going to help others by sharing it with them and subscribing to the podcast, because then you get all the episodes right away. rating and reviewing the podcast. We don't talk a lot about that because, we want to make sure we're making great content. That's what we're focusing on. We're hoping that you're getting it out there, sharing with others. But if you do like it, if it is something that really has helped you, again, like I said, rate and review it, share it. Whether it's on social media, but word of mouth really is the best way to share it. Just, with your clubs, with your fellow coaches, with your fellow leaders, different people that you're connecting with. And then also reach back out to us and let us know if you know any guests. Let us know if you have any other ideas of how we can make it better, any things that are really sticking out to you. That's something that I know I really appreciate. I'm not going to speak for Paul, but I know he appreciates as well.
Oh, yeah.
Hearing that feedback, and even with a couple of recent episodes, we've had some feedback. I had a friend, who said, "Hey, Paul Gizzi, that was so cool. I heard that little clip you did, and Paul was a huge impact. There has been a huge impact on my daughter at Biola." And so I was able to listen to that episode and really get a lot more insight into him. And that was so cool. So things like that, man, that definitely brings a smile on my face and joy to my life. And speaking of that smile on my face and joy to my life, you did mention there is a lot of stuff going on in our life. We got, not only is my oldest daughter getting married at the end of August, which will be, when this airs, will be like 3 weeks away, which is crazy. My nephew, I get to officiate his wedding on my 50th birthday, which is pretty cool. That's also in a couple weeks. That'll be about a week away when this airs. So next time we do an episode or do a recording, I will probably be over the really old age of 50. So I'll be wiser though. So that'll be cool.
True.
True. I will.
We've been waiting for that
show. You thought it was good before. Like, it's going to get just crazy. Like, the wisdom is just going to be flowing and exuding. That's the way I'd see it anyway. I'm
sure listeners can't wait to.
Yes.
They're waiting for wisdom on this show, I think.
Probably. Yeah, that's probably true. They're like, finally, maybe we have a shot. But my middle daughter's actually going to be heading out to South Africa to do some Youth with a Mission leadership track training. So that's going to be great. Drew, my son, is heading back to Biola here pretty soon. And then, we got my daughter's going to be driving in a month, my fourth, and that will help a lot, as we know. Any parents out there, I know you understand that beauty of that kid getting their license that can help drive, especially to soccer practices and other things. And then, Justin, trying out football, won another tournament last weekend, which was pretty cool with soccer, but, he's learning the hard knocks of football, not just the actual hitting, but it's not his first sport. And so to have to pay the dues and have to work your butt off to just get in the game, especially being at a school like Folsom High School, or, Folsom, now it's going into that, it's a state championship program. So, you don't just walk in and rest on your laurels that, I'm Justin Dark. Everyone knows me. No one knows who he is, and no one cares. And they don't care that he's really good at soccer. They don't care that he's a good athlete. You got to work your tail off. You got to memorize plays. You got to do all these different things. So anyway, it's been such a good lesson for him. It's been so good. He doesn't see it yet. I know that it's really frustrating. It's like, why am I even doing this? But I'm seeing it that he's having to really go after it. And, again, just to get on the field. And I think that's so good for our kids to be able to do that. And it's somewhat painful and hard to watch sometimes when I'm just sitting there watching other kids playing and my son just standing there trying to see over the tall lineman, because he is my son after all. So he's not 6'3", but it's really good when he gets in there to just do what he can. And, it's kind of like baseball. Strangely, it sounds the comparison football and baseball aren't typically compared, but when you're playing kind of third string football, oftentimes, and as a cornerback, most of the plays are handoffs. And so you get out there or your receiver, and you're with the third string quarterback, and they're not throwing a whole lot. They're handing off almost every. So you're not getting. It's kind of like baseball where you're standing out in the outfield and they don't ever hitting it to you. You got a great pitcher on the mound, and so it can get really boring. And so that's been an interesting thing for him. So anyway, that's not what we're talking about. But folks out there, I think that does go to what we're talking about on this show. Is oftentimes we talk about our kids playing other sports, and usually we're talking about it in the context of them learning those skills and, body, learning different athleticism for different sports and learning different sports and different ways of thinking. And that's all true. But it also could teach our kids lessons of, having to work your way up and maybe not getting usually not getting that immediate gratification that we often get in our primary sports, that we often get when we've been playing a sport our whole life. And so that's something that, I know a lot of the best athletes, yes, were 3-sport athletes. They were stars at every athlete when I was a kid. But I think that these lessons I'm seeing him learn now that he would never have learned if he just stuck to soccer, where, he is a known entity, and he's that guy in soccer, and he's a nobody on the football field. And that's okay. That's not only okay, it's actually really good, because that's probably more of a life lesson than anything, because that's what happens when you go into a new company. You don't just go into a new company and you're like, oh, hey, I'm here. I've always been the guy. They're like, you're in the mailroom. You got to work your way up, So anyway, what are your thoughts on all that?
I mean, the other perspective that your son or any of our kids get when they do that too, is that whether they figure it out or not right away, they have a new perspective for their teammates on their primary sport, that it's not their primary sport. All of a sudden, the guy on the end of the bench looks a little bit different to you when you've been that guy on the end of the bench. So it gives, from a leadership perspective, I think it's a great lesson, because being a leader, obviously you've got to be able to lead yourself. You've got to know yourself, but you need to know other people as well. And if you can look down the bench and have that perspective of, man, I've not sat on that bench, but I've sat on a bench like that. I've been the player who wasn't, the stud in a sport. I think it can give a great perspective. And the earlier they can learn that, the better, for sure. Right. There's some humble pie in there a little bit too. And I think it can make you appreciate, your skills and abilities in the sport that you really love and succeed at. But I think it also, from a leadership standpoint, gives you a perspective that you can't get, because you can't be a stud on a team and a bench player. It just doesn't work that way. Right. So when you take a step back, so to speak, and you play a different sport that's not your strength, and you become third string, all of a sudden you have a different perspective for those guys on your team where you are the stud. And I think that can really help your leadership skills, because now you can somewhat understand where they're coming from and maybe ways to help them get better. So I love that. Right. That's, I think, we've talked about it on the show before, but you're right. It's not just about the on the field skills and athleticism. It's the off the field skills of leadership as well.
That's right. And that's what I had the conversation I had with him, that exact conversation last night on the way home. It's like, hey, how can you be a leader from the sideline? How can you be a leader? Maybe, maybe God has you there to share the gospel with some of the kids out there.
Yep.
And, maybe you'll be the only example of that in their entire life. And maybe it might not be right this year, but maybe they'll have that example of you working really hard, talking to them, sharing life, leading from the sideline. And then 5 years from now, they're going to talk to somebody else who might have some, you never know. Right. Yeah. But if you go out there and you're just like, oh, this stinks, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to be, on the sideline pouting and just suffering through this year. And none of that's going to be allowed to happen, and you don't. And also, you know what? It might be that this year you're not doing anything, but next year you have a growth spurt. Next year something else happens, or through this year there's some injuries, and all of a sudden you get out there and you get a couple plays, and all of a sudden they see it. But he doesn't even know the holding rule. He was holding yesterday, and he was grabbing the guy. I'm like, dude, you're totally holding the guy. Like, how do you not know that? But how does he know it? He never learned it, and they just assume. And so the coach is like, that's holding. I go, well, that's where you got to go to the coach and be like, hey, coach, can you help me understand this? Yeah. Right. But again, you're going back to that empathy. Hopefully that'll help him see other kids, in other sports, whatever things he's doing that he knows, to be like, hey, let me help you out with that. Oh, and I've seen some of the other players helping him out with that. And that's been really cool. Just, hey, you're supposed to be over there just a little bit over, and it's great. Because that's, again, that teamwork. So awesome. Anyway, let's get into these episodes. That was something that I thought about, just last night. I was like, this would be an interesting thing to talk about. But
it's great.
So that's something that hopefully folks out there, you can relate. And, as we all have those situations with our kids where they're struggling with something. My oldest had that same thing. I think we may have even talked about it on the show, but he played basketball and got cut from the 8th grade team. And And rather than pouting and saying, "Oh, woe is me," he said, "What's the answer? I'm going to work harder. And I'm going to make the freshman team next year." And he did. And he ended up starting the next year. It doesn't always work out that way, but when you can, there's a couple of different ways to respond to that adversity. One is to go into a hole and pout. The other is, hey, let's go after it and let's make this happen. And that's where the champions actually, that's what they do. So, all right. Speaking of guys that, I don't know, champions, I'm sure he has been at some point in his life. We got Todd Yelton, was the first episode.
Champion.
He's been a champion a few times. But he, this was that Transformed After Tragedy show. That it was such an interesting. I know it's a good friend of yours. Todd is a good friend of yours, and just his story. You talked a little bit about his trip down to Costa Rica with you and Warrior Way, but I think the real things that stuck out to me in this episode were just that we were just talking about that overcoming adversity. That that what does that look like to take these tragic situations in our life. And, not necessarily in the midst of them, but as you see God using them and transforming them in something in you to make you be better in whatever you're doing. Right. And so I really saw that with Todd in that. And just as he said, like a few times throughout the episode, like if you talk to people before my wife passed away and then people after, I'm a different guy, like completely different guy. And, especially coaching and what that looks like. And it wasn't about, it had nothing to do with the soccer, right? It was just the way he treats people, the perspective, I think as well is what I saw there. But we never wish those things upon us or others, but, when they happen, how are you responding to them? So, I don't know what really stuck out to you with Todd. I know him a whole lot better than I do. In fact, I met him on that when we recorded that, which was cool. That doesn't happen very often either, although it did happen with a couple of these guests this season. So, what were your thoughts on Todd?
Well, I think perspective is a great word, right? I think we all are working on our perspective based on, what's been thrown our way, and when you look, into the eyes of tragedy, how is that going to shape you and mold you? And it doesn't mean, even he says, you don't have to, accept it or like it. Right. But you can choose how you want to, move through that into the next stage. And I think that it's a transformation moment for him for sure. And like you said, he talks about that and, feeling like he had to go back to some alumni and apologize for who he was during some times. And I'm sure on the other side of it, that there's players who are like, what are you even talking about? So
totally.
We're not talking about like this guy's, a mass murderer. And then all of a sudden he becomes a monk, it's not that kind of moment, but it is personal perspective of like, okay, this is, what are the things that really are important? And continue to battle, he'll talk about and did on the show, still battles with, humility, and what that looks like. But truly just a great man. He's been a winner, before and after tragedy, he was a winner. And I think I would say, this is not what he said, but this is how I would say it, is I think he's enjoying how he's winning now more than he enjoyed how he was winning before. Yeah. It means more, his perspective is more in line with, where he feels like he should be. He's full of, we talk about wisdom. He's full of wisdom and knowledge. He would not agree with that statement, but he is. Anybody who has the opportunity to speak with him or talk with him is going to benefit from that conversation. Yeah. So it was a great episode, very vulnerable, to his story. Mm-hmm. And I thought, part of the reason I think we do this is we want people to be able to tell their stories, not just to get their story out, to get it out, because it's going to hit someone right where they are. And I'm pretty sure that Todd's story hit someone listening right where they are in their moment where they needed it, and hopefully encourage them, in their, not only in their walk, but also, maybe in where they are in their career path or family life to move in a certain direction. So that's what I kind of hope through that.
Absolutely. No. And I thought that's really good as far as, hopefully, like you said, it met more than one. Hopefully it met several people, lots of people, and will continue to. And again, that goes to like, if you know somebody going through similar tragedies in their lives, it won't be the same thing, but this could maybe help them. Like you said, he was extremely vulnerable, and he's over 50, right? So that's probably where the wisdom comes from.
That's
So,
right. That's
so
right.
it must be, So, no, but in all seriousness, like that's something that we want to make sure that you're understanding, like we're doing this to help others through situations. And usually it's situations that are, you know, how we can bring out leadership from the game itself and things like that. But oftentimes it's those outside of the game situations that do affect us but that's what we talk about too. So yeah, definitely something I love.
We had,
I
we had some
really,
good laughs in there too. Some good laughs throughout that conversation as well.
of
It wasn't
course.
all, and he made fun of me a few times in there with our trip to Costa Rica and whatnot. But
Yes.
it was a good conversation.
Well, of course. I mean, we'll always have some laughs. Now we are laughing, at least. Other people might not be. I'm just going to be very clear. Sometimes other people don't think we are funny, but
No.
we do. So that's cool, and
Yeah.
probably a lot like our kids, we say things that they like shaking their head, but that's okay.
100%.
That's
100%.
okay. That's okay. All right. So definitely I kicked off this half of the season really, really well. It was something that, like you said, the vulnerability, and that's what I love is when we get guests who are, vulnerable, and most get to that level of vulnerability, which it makes it so much better. The next one we had was this was a fun one for me because I got to hear from Lance VanHaitsma. He is a referee, CONCACAF refereeing technical and development manager. We learned a lot. We learned what that actually means in the episode, which was a good start. But beyond that, I learned some things about you on the sideline as a coach from Lance. So I'm just going to tease that, folks. If you didn't listen, go back and listen to that episode, and you'll hear, Paul had something in vinegar that we often talk about. That on the sideline. So anyway, that's something that I learned. But beyond that, more importantly than that, that wasn't the most important thing. That was just kind of fun. We had a good time talking about that. But because he refereed in the Big 12 and had some experience with Paul and Marcy. But beyond that, more importantly, he talked a lot about just the lessons we learned from the refereeing side of the whistle, right? And what that looks like. One of the cool things too is hearing so many of the things that we talk about in the players' lives. He talked about for referee too, like in the resetting idea, right? Referees make these mistakes, and he said he gives some his tricks of the trade is when he had a wristband that he'd wipe the sweat off his brow. He reset using that wristband. He rather than dwelling on a mistake, because I referee, I know you make a mistake, you're like, shoot, I missed that one, I blew that one, and rather than like dwelling on it, as we know in soccer, when you dwell on it, you're going to keep making more mistakes. As a referee, it's the same thing. So he talks about some of that stuff, some of the spirit of the law versus the actual law, some other things in this episode. I've actually got a lot of feedback on this episode as well. People have really loved. They're like, man, I've never even thought about that from the referee side. We had another referee on, but he wasn't a soccer referee. So I think that was something that he probably missed something in translation a little bit. But I think with this episode, Lance, I thought just so well spoken too, man. Such a good dude that there was, I thought definitely if you don't like referees, just generally, this will be one that will make you, rethink that position. Not all referees are made the same, right?
Yeah.
But Lance, I thought was just a great interview. What'd you think?
Well, we talk about that. I think we talk about this a little bit on the episode is trying to like humanize the referee, right? I mean, we really in the game as players, as coaches, as parents, I think we dehumanize the referee a lot. And I think when you can bring some referees on like this, Lance is just one of the best guys in the game that I ever met. He's just a fantastic person, which is why we got along after, maybe after the first game. I don't know, but we got along. I got to be careful who I bring. I got to be careful who I bring on this show now. There's too much getting out about me that I didn't want really people to know. But no, he's a great guy. And you can tell why he's in a leadership position now, right? I mean, you talk about he's well spoken. Yeah. He's easy to listen to. He's wise. He's compassionate. And there's a reason he's in a leadership position now. But humanizing the referee, listening from his perspective, the things that referees deal with or struggle with, I think it's good for us to hear the other side because, that is a side of the game we don't hear a lot from. To be quite honest, we always say we want to hear the referee's perspective after a game, but I'm not sure we really do because it's
Yeah.
fun to be able to blame it on somebody, and that's an
Yeah.
easy target. Um, and he does. He talks a lot about, being able to move past things and not letting mistakes snowball into other mistakes and letting one mistake throw you off to where you've just had an awful game. Same as a player, right? That one mistake, if you're able to move past it, you can still have a great game. But if you can't move past it, you're going to have an awful game. Same thing with the referees. He talks a little bit about VAR, and I think that's an interesting topic from a referee's perspective that we don't get. Is he talks about VAR, kind of where it's come from, where it's going. He even talks about a little bit about actually talked about it, and then it actually happened in the Copa where the referees were actually talking. Announcing the result of the VAR. I think that was Copa that they did that at. But I think he talked about that on the episode, and then I saw it at Copa. Like, yeah, Lance told us about that on our episode that was going to happen. But I really really value Lance, and what we didn't talk about in the episode. We actually talked about it after we stopped recording. Was that he and his brother reffed together in the Big 12, and there's that family piece of it. We didn't get to it in the episode, but he and his brother, anytime they'd walk up to one of our games, I was happy because they did such a great job managing the game. So I really encourage you to go back and listen to that, and hopefully we'll get some more high level referees on here as well, because I think it's just a great perspective within the game.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it's even some low level referees to get, their perspective on the craziness of.
Well, we have you on here.
That's true. I'm very low level referee. I'm like very low level, extremely low level. And the people who have had me as a referee will probably agree with that. Yeah. So, that was, I really enjoyed that episode. I really did. I thought it was one that gave more insight into. I actually learned some things about refereeing as well, which was good. And he also talked about the importance of youth getting involved. I think parents getting involved, coaches getting involved with refereeing as well. One of the things I talked about that I think should happen is every team should have, a few referees on it. I think coaches should be required to referee at least a game or two to see what it is on that side of it. And parents, probably should be required to referee, maybe do some scrimmages or something as coaches, maybe to have your parents referee, in the middle. And they'll be like, well, I don't know the game. That's okay. Just get out there and see what it feels like, because it's not as easy as you think. And especially the higher you get, that higher level. I did think it was really cool when they did explain the decisions. I mean, sometimes you're like, I still don't agree, and that's okay. But at least you hear the like you said, it's humanized. It's like, hey, this is harder than it looks. And even with the automated offside calls, we saw in the Copa America, a lot of people did not agree with one of those offsides calls in the U.S. match. It's not perfect science. And even when you have that TV looking at it from those angles, it's really hard to tell. And so anyway, I was just at the Man U Arsenal match in SoFi. My brother took me to that for my 50th birthday. It was super cool. It's an amazing stadium. It was a lot of fun. But even that's a perfect example of, without VAR, I believe the first goal by Arsenal was offside. Of course, I'm a Man U fan, but I think it was offside. They didn't have VAR, but I think referees now are conditioned to wait for VAR a lot of times. But even so, it was a boom, boom, different angles. Where was the referee? Like, all those things went into that call. Without that technology, it's really, really difficult. And his son-in-law, so he's no relation to me, was there, and he goes, can somebody just explain to me offside? I felt like we were with Ted Lasso. And so by the end of the day, he understood offside, but when you start walking through all the different permeations of what's going on with an offside call, talking to somebody, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's something good episode. Definitely check it out. Lance VanHaitsma, definitely want to check that episode out. All right. The next one we had was Paul Gizzi. This was a fun one. I love Paul. He's such a good dude. And like I mentioned earlier, I got a few calls, a few emails, texts about this one, because he has had an impact on many, many people. And even the cool part of the episode was a lot of the book he's written, talking about God coincidences, as he calls them. that he has had in his life. His book is a lot of fun. He shared a few of them on the show. One was a funny one about, I don't know if it was a God coincidence as much as it was just a good lesson of controlling our anger when he threw his tennis racket and it slipped out of his hand and went into a pool, and he ended up playing a wet part of tennis. Finished that match being a little bit wet. So you can check that out. But I thought the thing about this episode that really struck me was just, I think Paul has allowed God to just work through him in his life and take him to places that, he was, obviously he didn't choose to be in Japan as a child. That was part of his family upbringing. But then after that, he just said, you know what, this is going to be part of my life where I'm going to just let God take me places and just follow. And that's and then to be able to be aware of these different things that are happening around me. And that's something I've tried to do in the different ministry that I've done, but to hear it from his perspective, and I know we're wired very similarly as I've gotten to know Paul. But it was an episode for me to hear it from his perspective, what I'd read about, what I'd talked with him about a little bit, but his work with the Seahorses, now the SoCal Eagles, has just been a faithful journey. Some of the fun stories from his playing days about the humility where he thought he was the guy and then he didn't even get announced at the game, and things like that, where it was just some humbling experiences that he could have used for the bad, but he's used for the good. So anyway, what were your thoughts about that episode with Paul?
Yeah, and again, this is opposite of the other two episodes where I knew the other two. Maybe you didn't as well. You knew Paul better than I did, but there's a richness to guys like Paul that have a depth of knowledge and experience that comes across in a conversation like we had. Just a richness and a depth to someone like that of experience and wisdom that just comes through the conversation. And you're just another one of those conversations where you're just kind of, for me at least, getting to know him, I'm just absorbing like a sponge, like you said, just taking those lessons from his experiences and challenging myself, right? And whether it's ministry within Warrior Way or just day-to-day living out ministry in the daily life, But yeah, definitely some great stories in there. Definitely a lot of wisdom as well, where wisdom might be the topic or the word of the day today is wisdom, because maybe in celebration of your wisdom birthday, there's a lot of wisdom. But no, definitely great episode, a lot of great stuff in there just from his experiences and just the humility of it. We've had guests similar that we talk about that have these experiences that you're like, man, I just want to hear more. I want to keep hearing more of what you've done and seen and what God's shown you. He's probably forgotten more of it than we'll ever experience.
Probably. And that's, I think that's also been a theme of most of our episodes where we're like, we gotta get you back because there's just so many more stories here that we are not able to get to. And I remember, like Horst, back when we did Horst Richardson, and he's like telling stories about almost losing people in China on a boat, and like, what the heck, like that. There's so much more to that story, let alone, I can't imagine that's why I think we called that 50 Years of Stories, in fact, was the name of that episode. But so I definitely go check out that episode with Paul. You're gonna laugh. You're gonna he got vulnerable as well. I mean, I think there were some moments of near tears in that one, which when you're almost getting tears in episodes, you're doing something right. Now we've had a few of those episodes, right? I know Todd was definitely there. Paul was as well, and I think it's just really it's a testament to who they are, that they're willing to get vulnerable on a podcast episode, but it's also a testament to the life they've lived, that it's one that has these moments where they've learned so much and so deeply, and they're looking at it and willing to share it with us. So definitely check that out. All right. So we also had we thought this is an important issue, this NCAA settlement that's coming down. It's come down, and now they're talking about roster size limits, and the implications of that are going to be huge. The soccer roster size limit is 28. And that's what a lot of people are focusing on, particularly in the women's game. That's definitely something that will be relevant with Title IX and everything. but the football roster size limit has gone to 105. I think that will have more impact on everything because that will take away scholarships from other things. It will also have Title IX implications. We don't know what all of that is yet. We're not going to get into that in this episode. You're probably waiting for us to go to that next thing. We're going to do another episode about that as it kind of plays out a little bit, because we do know that a lot of schools have just put recruiting on hold at this point. And we didn't even talk about all that in depth on the NCAA settlement episode. What we did talk about, those implications we knew were coming down the pike. But I thought that was a good conversation just to really give you a primer on what the settlement is, some of the implications with Title IX, some of the implications on soccer, particularly at the Division I level, but it's going to have a trickle down effect on the Division II, Division III, NAIA levels. And so that episode, I know Paul and I both have gotten some feedback on that one. And I know I learned a lot from Paul on that episode. He probably didn't learn a lot from me, but we had a good conversation about the settlement itself, as well as, there's a Forbes article on it you can go check out. But that I would definitely recommend, if you are someone who has any connection with college soccer, whether your kid is wanting to go play, whether you're a coach at some level, whether you are currently playing college soccer or have kids who are playing college soccer, it will impact you at some level. And so I would definitely check out that episode, and again, share it with others if they're trying to navigate this thing going, what the heck is going on? I know a couple people actually, I got a text from a friend and she's like, my daughter, this is what coach was telling my daughter, this might be coming down the pike. She could have gotten a scholarship from them if this was, if we would have waited. And I go, I think you did the exact right thing, but there's still implications that they're not aware of. And so I know that this is something that's impacting people. I think people have some trepidation about it. I don't think you need to have trepidation about it. I think you just need to see it as another thing that's happening that you need to put into the mix and not freak out about it, but go, okay, what are the implications on the other side of this? And how can I navigate this new part of the journey? And it's something that we're going to have to, because it will impact college soccer in big ways. But anyway, do you have any other thoughts on that? I think we shared most of our thoughts in that episode.
Yeah,
but
I just
what
think
do you
that
think?
we're all just navigating into a new normal. What is the new normal going to look
Yeah.
like? And we're in that transition phase that, right now nobody really knows. Along with that comes unintended consequences. We've put ourselves into a new territory, and good or bad or whatever, there's going to be unintended consequences. I think one thing we didn't talk about that I'll throw out there that I think we're going to start seeing is we're going to start seeing some guys and girls retiring from the game of soccer. They maybe they've been doing it a long time, and they just kind of say, hey, you know what, this might be the time for me to jump out, whether for whatever reason. But I think some of it is, I don't think I really had the energy to navigate, this new territory. It's time for someone else to come in and do that. And I also think it's going to impact the coaching landscape. I think athletic departments are going to look differently on why they hire and fire, and when they hire and fire. So those are some other things I think that are unintended consequences, and maybe some other things that we don't think about that will be impacted through some of these decisions. So I'm looking forward to seeing kind of how this plays out a little bit, and then jumping on again and having another conversation about it.
Yeah. And I think those unintended consequences will be a lot about what we're talking about, because I think the intended things we can figure out.
Yeah.
But those things are I think less than what are going to be the unintended. And there's going to be a lot more litigation. There's going to be a lot more fighting about this. And it's going to be really interesting to see. At some semblance, I think the rich will get richer, and the top teams will be more top teams. But that's something that we talked a little bit about on that episode. So go check that out and let us know your thoughts. Let us know what about that you want us to cover too, because I'd love to just, hear from you so that we can kind of shape the future conversations about that. We're not going to be a podcast about that, but it will be something that we cover, because we do know it's very relevant to the people that listen to this, to this.
There are going to be
show.
some great leadership lessons coming out of that too, Phil.
Yes, there will.
That is what this is about, the show primarily. But I think we're seeing, we could really dive into, the leadership piece of that, how decisions are made, how they impact people, and all that as well. So it is, it's an interesting topic for sure.
100%. 100%. We will always pull out those leadership lessons because that is what this podcast is about. Speaking of leadership lessons, the final guest we had in this half was Jessica Hain. This episode just came out a couple weeks ago when you're listening to this. Well, I don't know when you're going to listen to this, but when this releases. And Jessica was the head coach at Liberty University. She founded the Fulcrum Center. We learned what a fulcrum is. If you didn't remember back from, I think, physics, you may have forgotten, but she reminds us of what that is. And I'm going to make you go listen to that if you don't know what a fulcrum is. But Jessica, the thing that the title of the episode really gives you insight into what I pulled out of this one. Not a lot of times titles episodes do that. But empathy, soccer IQ, and the next best action. She talked about that. I think it was Raymond VanHaitsma, right? That's how you pronounce it, right? But he had this thing that she really grabbed onto that talked about that soccer does have the next best action. And, what does that look like? But then also, so that was something that really stuck out to me. But then that idea of when you have empathy, when you truly are seeing what the other players on your team need, your soccer IQ will go through the roof. And I thought that was so powerful. That wasn't just soccer IQ, but I think that translates into life. And empathy is not my biggest strength on Strength Finders. It's actually scientifically proven that empathy is not in fact, it's one of my lowest. But it's something I've had to work on, and it's something that I've had to work on because it truly is something that will help us be better leaders. The empathy is massive in leadership. DISC, we talk a lot about DISC. That's understanding yourself and understanding others so that you can communicate better, right? If you're not having empathy, your soccer IQ, your emotional IQ, your other IQs will not be where they need to be in leadership. And so that was something that was really powerful for me. I just loved learning from her about a lot of the other things she talked about in that episode, but that's the one thing that really stuck out to me. And she goes much deeper into that in that episode. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like most of our guests, just the personal story, right? The personal journey of even just sharing her faith journey. Where God hit her in a probably for some people maybe it's a later part of life, but her time in Brazil and how that impacted her coaching, her life overall. She referred to her time in Brazil and the folks in Brazil as her family, and how those things impact your growth as a person, how it impacts your view of the world, your view of leadership. So I think she's got a great story that's obviously everybody's is different, but hers is really different, and it kind of gets her to where she is. And I think the pieces fall together really well in how she's gotten to where she's at and the work that she's doing in ministry. And it overlaps a lot with what, I feel like we're trying to do with Warrior Way, right? Like, how are we getting faith really more into sport? What does that really look like? How can coaches of faith really impact their coaching and their players with that? And what does that really look like? And I think that overlap for me was insightful. And I took a lot from that episode.
Yeah, and the other cool thing about this is if you're wanting to go deeper in kind of the ability to make disciples through coaching, through soccer, that's something I'm working on with Jessica. We're doing some cohorts with that. We're creating some different trainings on that as well. So if that's something you're interested in at all, we went to the Coaches on Mission gathering, which kind of dips your toe into the water on those things. But if you want to go deeper, reach out to me. I got my email in the show notes. You can reach out to me on that. And Jessica and I are working on that. She's got tons of experience in that as a coach, but also that she's doing her PhD on that. And so that's something that she talks about the PhD as well in that episode. But definitely reach out to me if you're interested in that at all. And if you're interested in working with us on that too, if that's something that you have a passion for as well. So that's our season 11. And as we've talked about on a couple of the episodes, we're now going to be, you heard at the beginning of the episode, my daughter's getting married in about I think almost exactly a month from when we're recording this. It'll be about 3 weeks after this releases. But we're going to take a little break from our normal programming and we're going to have some recasts. Those will be some great episodes that we want to make sure you've heard. And even if you've heard them already, I encourage you to listen to them again, because chances are they will be things that you can learn from. I know I'm going to do that, and I'm going to learn from them again. And so the other thing that we've started doing is having a little blurb at the beginning, maybe a quote, maybe something that our guest said during the episode that really piqued our interest. Having that before the intro music. So I'd love to hear your feedback on that as well. Do you like that? Do you not like it? Does it work? So I know I'd love to hear your feedback on that as well.
So I'd like to know too if people did what I did when they first heard it, because I didn't know it. You snuck that in there. It was awesome. Yeah. But did you think initially maybe you were further ahead in the episode than you thought? You tried to rewind it. That's what I did the first time. But it caught my attention. But I'm a fan. I
like it. All right, cool. Well, good. Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about that. But it's new. I just kind of threw it out there. I
like it.
I just said, hey, let's try it. Let's see what happens. But we're trying new things. We're gonna take a little break, but we'll come back probably sometime in September. Don't know exactly when yet, but until then, we're gonna have episodes. And like we said, this will hopefully give you some time to go back and listen to some of those 150 episodes that are back there. And there's so much good stuff, and chances are you haven't listened to all of them. Maybe you have. Maybe go back and listen to some of the other stuff, or just take a break. Enjoy the beginning of school with your family. Enjoy the different sports that are going on, and not like this is taking over your life or anything. But point is, there's other things that you can be doing and during this time, and we will come back. We are not stopping. We are continuing. And you said that at the beginning, like the number is a big number, but what most people don't realize is most podcasts, the vast majority of podcasts, don't even make it to 10 podcasts.
Yeah.
And so this is something that we are continuing doing because A, we're learning a ton through it, but B, we know it's helping others. And so we plan on continuing for a long time. So anyway, folks, with that, Paul, you got any last thoughts on season 11?
Another great season still. I'm looking forward to what's coming. I know that folks will enjoy the recast of episodes, but all the best to you and your family with everything you got going on over the next couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to the wiser Phil when we get back.
See what happens. I mean, we're pumping it up, so I hope it actually happens. We'll see. Might just be that I'm older and crotchety, but we'll see. Anyway, folks, with all that, if nothing else, come back later to find out the answer to that question. But with all that, we hope that you are learning and engaging with us as we are doing these episodes. We hope that it's something that is, helping you flourish, helping you be better in all that you're doing. And so, we do have the warriorwaysoccer.com link on the show notes. You can check out what Paul and Marcy are doing there. Providence World to find out more of what we're doing with Providence World. We're actually going to be starting to do some soccer ministry down in Honduras here in the next few months, as well as other sports ministries. There's one of the daughter of our director is a triathlete. She in fact just won the 20 to 29 age group of the triathlon that she just did last weekend. It was an Olympic triathlon. The first time she'd done that, which I found out an Olympic triathlon is a quarter Ironman. So, or half of a half triathlon, which would be a quarter, presumably, of an Ironman.
A lot of math.
But it's way too much math. It's too early for math for me, but I think that's right. Somebody's going to correct me because I did it wrong for some reason, but if I was. But that's something that we're going to be doing as well. So you can check that out there at the show notes if you want to learn more about the disc and coaching the bigger game. All those things are there. Most importantly, we hope that you're taking what you're learning from this and you're using it to be a better coach, a better parent, a better spouse, a better teacher, a better leader, better in everything that you do. And continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great time until our next episode. See ya.